You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi, where each episode we break down a different Propagandhi song. This week is a little different in that we're talking about the 2010 Sacrifice Propagandhi split 7-inch, featuring Sacrifice's take on Anthem by Rush and Propagandhi's take on Technocracy by Corrosion of Conformity. Something super awesome about this physical release is that the cover artwork painting for the 7-inch was done by Todd Kowalski from Propagandhi. It is a really wonderful cover. It is a mashup of the Fly By Night and Technocracy covers from Rush's Fly By Night record and COC's Technocracy cover. And I love it because the owl is landing on a barrel of toxic sludge in like a frozen, ice-covered wasteland. And we were talking earlier, like maybe it's like post-apocalyptic Canada, you know?
Or Canada now.
Yeah, exactly.
And Rush's Anthem appears on the 1975 full-length album Fly By Night, which was the first record to feature Neil Peart. Peart wrote the lyrics to Anthem, and Lee and Lifeson wrote the music. After the recording of the record, the band's first gig was in Winnipeg, home to the almighty Propagandhi. We come full circle.
Yes.
And next, Corrosion of Conformity's Technocracy appears on the 1987 EP by the same name. And this song is categorized, it's kind of like a crossover hardcore thrash song.
I love it, you know, and the Propagandhi track was like, according to the liner notes, this is really hilarious. Chris is very well known for his self-deprecating sense of humor, but on the inside of the 7-inch, I loved how he wrote that it was haphazardly recorded, carelessly produced, and erratically mixed by Chris Hanna at Illegal Combatant Studios, also known as the room in the basement beside the toilet. So the 7-inch came out on Winnipeg's own War on Music label, which, if any listeners out there haven't looked through, is an amazing label with tons of amazing records. As we were like thinking about this episode, I went to this label's website because, you know, it's on the back of the 7-inch that I'm holding right here. And I couldn't believe some of the records they had there. And I wound up buying vinyl copies of Sacrifice's LPs Forward Determination, Soldiers of Misfortune. They have some other Sacrifice records as well. And I ordered them on vinyl. And like, this label is absolutely awesome. So everybody should go check out waronmusic.com, which is a label based in Winnipeg. So it's pretty cool.
And when Propagandhi first announced this split on their website, it was kind of like a blog entry. It said that the band called it a dream come true split 7-inch. And it came out on December 10th, 2010. And we're super stoked to talk about it on this episode.
Yeah. And, you know, whenever I was thinking about this particular episode, you know, this is another cover. This is a covers episode that we're doing. It's not a song written by Propagandhi. It's 2 songs, 2 bands. And so I was thinking about the best way to go about doing this. And so we came up with an idea for some special guests. So Keith, tell me about the guest that you got for this episode.
Yeah, I got to talk to Rob Urbinati from Sacrifice and about the origin of the music scene in Toronto, and like the origin of like the hardcore and punk and thrash metal scene, and how that evolved, how this cover came about, his thoughts on covering a band that means so much to him. And it was really cool to chat with someone, you know, who was like there at the beginning of this massive, successful, you know, scene where I am still kind of unfamiliar with.
Yes. It was an awesome chat with Rob that you got to have, and I was really pleased to be able to listen to it after it was all done.
Greg, who did you interview?
Well, I'm very excited about my guest as well. I got to talk to another member of Sacrifice, Joe Rico, and Joe and I talked about his musical history. We talked a lot about the intervening years between Sacrifice's breakup in 1993 and their return in 2006. We talked about his friendship and collegiality, essentially, between Propagandhi and Sacrifice. We talked about the origin of the split 7-inch, but we also got into talking about Chris Hanna's take on 2 of the recent Sacrifice covers that Chris did for his Patreon page, A Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality, which if you haven't signed up yet for, dude, go sign up at patreon.com/JesusHChris. But oh my gosh. So Joe and I got to talk a lot about Chris's covers as well. And it was just such a delight to talk to these guys. So before we get into these interviews, it is also, I think, important to acknowledge the drummers who played on the two original versions of these songs, Anthem and Technocracy. So Neil Peart from Rush and Reed Mullen from Corrosion of Conformity. Reed Mullen played on almost all of COC's records, except for, I think, just the full length In the Arms of God, which came out in like 2005 while he was out of the band for an injury for a while. But Reed Mullen unfortunately passed away on January 27th of this year, 2020, at just the age of 53. And January seems like a different world now at this point. You know what I mean?
And Neil Peart, drummer and lyricist from Rush, passed away 20 days before Mullen on January 7th, 2020, at the age of 67. And these two drummers, whose work is expansive and influential across the world, and are both the drummers featured by Propagandhi and Sacrifice on this split 7-inch, should be appreciated by listeners and remembered for their inspiring musicians that they were. And for me, I remember that very clearly because I mentioned before, I have a after-school music club. And a lot of my students last year were really into Rush, and I saw that news right before the end of the day. So I started the club on that day on Friday with just a video of like a solo video of him playing, and kind of announced to the students who knew who he was, of course, that he had passed away.
Yes. So it's been a sad year for fans of Rush, fans of Corrosion of Conformity, and it's really amazing to me that both of these drummers' work is highlighted on this one split 7-inch between Propagandhi and Sacrifice. It's kind of an amazing little tribute that they have there. So, all right. So what we'll do in this episode is we're going to air our chats with Rob Urbinati first, and then Joe Rico, and we're going to air these interviews back to back. The interviews do not overlap content-wise, except for in very minor ways. So if you are a fan of Sacrifice, this is like an hour of just fantastic conversation for you. And if you've never heard Sacrifice, I cannot recommend their records enough. If you're ever fans of like Slayer or like old 80s Metallica, Anthrax, whatever. I mean, if you're a fan of like today, like Municipal Waste or DRI, Sacrifice has got something for everyone. So we're going to get into our chat with Rob Urbinati, guitarist and vocalist from Sacrifice, and then we'll go to our interview with Joe Rico, the guitarist from Sacrifice, and we're going to discuss the split 7-inch and their relationship and friendship with Propagandhi. So enjoy.
Rob of Sacrifice, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
Rob, can you talk a bit about your relationship with music? Like, what were the first bands that you loved? When did you first start playing music? And then how did you get into metal?
I've got 4 older brothers. So when I was growing up, they had records lying around the house. I think when I was probably about, pretty young, probably about 4 years old or whatever, I remember seeing Alice Cooper albums around, and I liked them because they had bugs on them and stuff. And eventually I started playing them, and my brothers give me crap for ruining the records and stuff. But from there, I just, like everybody else, I guess, my age that likes rock, you discovered Kiss and, got really into Ace Frehley. And I think that was really the first music I really got into on my own. And then it went from there, just Sabbath, and, then I discovered Priest. And my brothers also had tapes lying around their car of Priest and, Van Halen and stuff like that. So I just grew that way, and there's kind of guitars lying around the house too. So they'd show me a little bit here and there. And eventually I took lessons, and just guitar became a real passion for me when I was pretty young.
How about like the local music scene for, underground or younger bands? What was that like early on?
Well, it was weird because, like when we first started discovering, this new kind of metal that was coming out, it wasn't, traditional metal. It was a lot faster and harder, and it was basically what we were looking for. There was really no underground yet. Like we kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say we started the underground here in like Toronto, but I mean, really, there wasn't much around.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started playing, there wasn't really anybody to play with at first. They'd put us on a bill with like hair bands or something that our music didn't really fit together. And then we started discovering hardcore, and that was our, that seemed like the path, for us to play with bands. It was kind of better to play with them than the other metal bands in town. So we got into hardcore that way, and just started, we started going to a lot more shows than we'd end up playing with these bands. But yeah, that's how that started.
It seems like even for me getting into extreme music just about 20 years ago, that even from this time, shows seem way more homogenous now, that you don't really see as many hardcore and metalcore or metal and death metal or thrash bands playing together. It seems now that things are so much the same, and there's like less variety on a package. Especially, I can't imagine what it must have been like for those early shows.
Well, it wasn't all that dissimilar then. Like there wasn't that diverse thing with genres then. There was like hardcore and metal, and so it was kind of the same then in some respects. Although these genres hadn't been all mapped out yet, so you could get a band like from the metal side, you could get a band like Agent Steel that was, had the high pitched vocals, Maiden kind of vocals, but they were an underground band. You know what I mean? It wasn't like there was everything wasn't split into genres like it is now.
Mm-hmm. That's also just super interesting because everyone I know and I'm close with who's into metal is, my age, and I'm 36. So we've kind of all come into music at the same time. So our stories and experiences are different. So hearing from someone at the beginning and starting that, it definitely kind of widening my knowledge here.
Well, it was kind of actually, sorry to interrupt, it was actually exciting the first couple of times when metal bands played with hardcore bands. It hadn't really happened much yet, and when you got a bigger metal band and there would be hardcore bands out, you'd wonder how the crowd would react. And at the beginning, people weren't that accepting. There's people like us that were into it, but not everybody was, and it didn't take long to change.
Mm-hmm. I read an article from Blabbermouth, and it mentioned Brazil's Marquee Records, and it says that it helped to renew interest in Sacrifice by reissuing your first 3 albums. And I'm just curious, before the first reunion, what was happening behind the scenes before that first reunion show in Toronto took place?
Well, when we first started talking about doing these reissues, a lot of us in the band, like we hadn't really had much contact for like a really long time. Once in a while, one of us would give each other a call, but it had been a long time apart. Joe, our guitar player, and myself, we've kept in contact, but especially Gus, our drummer, none of us had really spoke to him for like literally something like 17 years. So we got in touch. We'd actually met up a few years before this, but we got in touch and got together and talked about what was going to happen. And it was just water under the bridge at that point. We just kind of realized we were being stupid and, let's just forget the past and let's move on. We didn't really talk anything about getting back together to play, but that came a bit later.
What was that like? Like, what did it take to get ready, either musically, mentally? How did you prepare?
Oh, it was from all sides. Yeah, it was pretty difficult. First of all, just to get our chops back, like some of these old Sacrifice songs are really hard to play. And when you haven't been, when we were rehearsing 3 times a week or whatever, it was second nature to us then, but to get our chops back to play these songs took a little while for sure. Yeah, it was also difficult mentally because we played in some smaller bands. We hadn't gone on a stage and played in front of, a lot of people for a really long time. So that was hard to, of course you have your doubts, like, can we still do this? How am I going to feel on stage again, playing these songs? And you don't want to disappoint anybody. Mm-hmm. So we made sure we rehearsed the crap out of our songs and came prepared, and it, thankfully it worked out.
So yeah, that was 15 years you guys hadn't played a show. So at the day of the equinox in 2006, Greg and I talked about that show, that reunion show, on our first song episode of the podcast, since Propagandhi's Bangers and Braces about Chris and Todd seeing you guys play, reliving their youth, still loving your band after all this time, but also realizing you hadn't lost a step. That's from the fans' perspective. Did you feel the same way?
I think as soon as we hit the stage, we felt good. As soon as that first note hit, we could feel the crowd is behind us, and there's a really weird atmosphere in there that night. I don't know if it was just us because we're so nervous, but you could feel some kind of anticipation, I guess. And so right from that first note, we felt pretty good. Since this is like Propagandhi podcast, I've got a cool story about the first time I heard Bangers and Brace.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I had no idea that this was going to happen. I think Chris emailed me and said, give me your address. I want to send you our new album. So a little while later, supporting cast comes in the mail. I open it up, throw it in my Mac, turn it up. So I'm listening to it, and I've got the CD book out, and I'm reading along with the lyrics. And at some point there's a break in the music, and I just started, skipping through and reading some of the lyrics of the other songs later in the album. And then I got to a Bangers and Brace, and the song wasn't even on yet. And I just noticed there's a couple of lines from our songs in this song. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's this? So I skip ahead, and it starts, and there's a bit from, I think it's from our first album. There's a tiny little bit at the beginning, what I'm talking about, one by one will take you thing. So yeah, and the song starts, I'm reading the lyrics along. I just couldn't believe it, because I was really taking in what he was saying, and started understanding this is a song about going to our show, our reunion show. And that, I can't tell you what that means to a band when you read lyrics and hear a song like that. Like I tell people, like, it doesn't matter what award you win or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Like this, nothing will top it. It was really one of the coolest things that's happened to us as a band.
That's funny too, sending it and not even mentioning, and just like hoping that you'll find it whenever you listen to it.
We had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. So we're calling each other on the phone. Oh my God, did you hear this? Yeah. Yeah, that was a really cool experience.
Being honored by fellow musicians. Like me, I'm definitely not a musician. To have that connection, that's got to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, from musicians that you respect, like they do some things that there's no way we could do. They're weird time signatures, and they're always doing something unexpected. Like there's a lot, especially on their last album. I guess if you're not a Rush fan, you might not hear, but I hear it. There's always the unexpected. It's not just 4/4 all the time, and verse chorus. There's a lot of thought goes into the songwriting, and it's we really respect them as musicians, definitely.
I've actually had to rely on a friend of mine who's a huge Rush fan, especially for one of the most recent episodes we recorded. I sent him the song When All Your Fears Collide, because I'm like, dude, I can't talk about this with my working knowledge of guitar, of music, or whatever. You got to help me take down some notes here.
Yeah, it's definitely like there's some musicians bands, you know what I mean? Where musicians get, and a lot of people don't get it when you're not playing an instrument or something.
what I love about, 10, 15 years ago was finding out about music, maybe from a zine or from a friend or later on from a message board. So for me, finding out about your band from one of my favorite bands just feels very organic. So I'm curious if you have like a Banger's Embrace story. Is there a moment with a band that you love that maybe influenced your sound while you were younger and older? If that's Rush, since we're going to chat a little bit about the split 7-inch, or maybe another band.
Geez, that's a pretty hard question to answer. Well, I remember like that. I always tell people the best show I've ever seen in my life, and nothing will ever top this, is Judas Priest on their Scream for Vengeance tour.
Nice.
I was probably, I'm guessing maybe 14 or 15 years old, but yeah, it was pretty amazing. And just to see, back in those days, metal bands had these huge stage sets. I guess they still do, but there's not as many huge bands anymore.
Yeah.
But just to see them on this huge stage with tons of amps, and you're like 14 years old, and it's just incredible hearing them play these songs that you've been listening to. And I guess that's my moment.
So what made you choose Anthem by Rush to cover with the split with Propagandhi?
Well, we're all Rush fans. It's pretty hard to be a Canadian rock guy without having tons of Rush albums in your collection. So it's a band we grew up with. It also, Gus, our drummer, loves Neil Peart, as pretty much every drummer should or does. And we're just, we're at rehearsal like any band. We just screw around with covers once in a while. One day we started playing this, and we thought, hey, let's, maybe we can cover this. And it just pretty much came about like that.
Was there any hesitation covering Rush, since they have such a diehard fan base?
Well, when we're going to release a Rush cover, I don't think it's so much on the radar of the Rush fan base, other than, Sacrifice combined with Rush fan base.
Right.
But there was a little bit for me, just with Geddy's vocals. I'm obviously not going to try and imitate Geddy. And, if that's even possible. For me, it's absolutely not. But, we don't really see much of a point in doing a cover song unless it's just to do it, note for note, exactly how it is. It's, that's like bar band kind of stuff. And you kind of want to put your own thing into it. So I guess we did that. And, it's obviously a lot different with me doing the vocals on it. But that was the only thing I really had an issue with. We knew that for sure Rush fans were going to have a problem with.
Right. Yeah. I was scrolling through like comments on YouTube, and I see a lot of positive, responses of people saying, "Hey, I've been a Rush fan for 20 years, and this song, this cover is awesome, and it's supposed to be a thrash cover, so it's not a Rush cover." But of course, there are a lot of comments about the vocals also, but I hear that all the time. People always say, "Oh yeah, I like the music, but not the vocals." And a friend of mine pointed out, a lot of non-Rush fans say the same thing about Geddy Lee's vocals, which I just think that's kind of funny that there's kind of the same comment being made about your version.
Oh yeah, like being a Rush fan when I was a kid, there'd be a lot of people go, "I can't stand this guy screaming." It's almost the same. And I think sometimes people appreciate when a band that's a lot different will do a cover of a band they like, just to, I guess, like I find it cool myself when I see that, just because, wow, this band's into this band. If you understand what I'm saying.
Not expecting them to cover an artist that you wouldn't think they listen to.
Right. So I think people appreciate, on some level, people can appreciate, that you can actually play a Rush song. So that's something right there that gets people. But yeah, I mean, if people want to, say they don't like the vocals, I completely understand if you're a Rush fan.
No, and I love your personal stamp on the cover. I mean, it sounds like Rush, But at the same time, I think if someone had only really heard Sacrifice, I don't think this song feels like an outlier. It doesn't sound like, something where, where it's very clearly a band outside of what they would normally play. I mean, you guys really put your mark on it.
Yeah, we didn't want to soften it up, and we kind of, there's a few parts where Alex Lifeson does a bit more chord picking and stuff. We just left that out and just, kept it driving.
Chris Hanna of Propagandhi said in an interview, he said, Sacrifice said, nobody liked us anymore. We're playing great music, but no one came to our shows. And I'm curious, do you think the metal scene has caught up with what your band has been doing? Or do you still think it's kind of fickle with trends coming and going?
Well, I think when you get to when you're like a 30-year plus band, I think the people that are there still listening to you, they're there, you're part of their childhood, or you're part of, some part of their life, and that music's not going to leave. I think what happened with us, it wasn't so much with us, it's just the whole genre. People were seeing Metallica and bands like that get bigger, and they'd softened their sound up a little bit, and people started saying, well, this death metal band's still heavy, so we'll listen to that now. And I think that kind of killed that genre at that time, but it didn't take long for it to come back. I mean, from the time we broke up, it was only a few years later when I first heard The Haunted, and they were, I think, maybe the first thrash band that came, new thrash band that came out. I was like, wow, it's coming back already.
Yeah, that was actually, I was going to mention earlier, one of the bands that I saw in Chicago, it was The Haunted with like a variety of hardcore and metalcore bands, like a very diverse mix of subgenres of extreme music with them headlining. And that just doesn't seem to take place as much, at least for like touring packages.
Yeah, touring packages are kind of, you're right in the fact that they're kind of samey. They have a lot of times the same kind of bands on the bill. So it's like, for us, we get a chance to play with a band like Propagandhi. It's amazing to have, a little bit of diversity on the show.
Just looking through the bands that you've toured with, so with obviously overlapping a ton, like early death metal and thrash overlaps quite a bit, touring with Death and Bolt Thrower. What was the response when you were coming through, like the States, when you were playing with those bands?
For the most part, it was really good. The Bolt Thrower tour was a little bit rougher for us because, it was like a full-on death metal crowd, right? So there were, there's people that were in their 20s and had known Sacrifice from before and started listening to death metal too. So there's a lot of those people as well. But we could feel that the atmosphere was changing with what people were listening to at the time. People were kind of getting sick of seeing bands like us. They wanted to see death metal bands. But the next tour we did was with Death, and people consider Death a death metal band, but really they have a lot of similarities to what we do too. So that tour was seemed like a lot better for us.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like as metal evolves, thrash to me seems to be in a way like a backbone, with so many styles coming from thrash and bands, blending genres, whether it's crossover or black and thrash and death thrash. I sort of see thrash as like an underappreciated underdog in a way. Can you share with our listeners what has like this specific genre, what has thrash meant to you over the years?
Well, it's weird for someone my age to go back and that wasn't called thrash. There was just people didn't know what to call it. There's is it, people were calling it hardcore metal, or, even back in those days, people would say metalcore, or, I can't remember how the thrash thing came, but eventually there's probably some kind of Metallica record review in a magazine that called it thrash metal, and that stuck. So for me, growing up listening to new wave of British heavy metal, you'd always be wanting the the faster band, the band that took it a bit further. Like I remember when Accept put out Fast as a Shark, you're like, wow, this is really fast, you know? Like today it's not that fast, but then it was, you know, that was the standard. And the Toronto band Anvil, they had some pretty fast stuff. Exciter from Ottawa, they're pretty fast too. And you know, these bands were a lot heavier than what new wave of British heavy metal was. So when actually Metallica and Venom and these bands started coming out, it was like, this is what I've been waiting for, you know. This is, you know, this is exactly what I want. And, you know, made everybody want to go out and form a band right away.
For me, kind of, you know, hearing your discography, you know, much later and going back and listening, what I love is that it doesn't waver regarding like whatever was being played at the time. I mean, there might be a little bit more groove or some mid-tempo parts here and there, but it is straightforward, catchy, memorable, melodic, in your face, fast, just solid metal that didn't try to, you know, repackage like everybody else was. So I got to say, like, I just appreciate the zero gimmick, the in your face metal.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I mean, we are, I don't know, individually, I think the members of the band aren't, you know, none of us are a total virtuoso, but if you put us together and we can write some songs, you know, we can, you know, really push our limits. You know, Gus, our drummer, is especially, he never plays to a click tracks in the studio or whatever. So and I like that because sometimes we'll start a song and it's pretty fast and he'll get hyped and but he just knows the right tempo that he can play as fast as he can, where it's just about to fall off the rails, but it won't. So that's something that, you know, we don't want to screw around with too. And, you know, we know what we do best. We don't want to just try new things and try and fit it in just because, like, we know what we do best and we like doing it. So why not do it?
Yeah, for sure. And you guys are great at it. So, well, Rob, this is awesome. You know, thank you for your time. Thanks for chatting with me about Sacrifice, about metal, about your Rush cover. This has been a really cool conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Joe Rico, guitarist of Sacrifice. Welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. We're just so delighted to have you and Rob taking part in our project for this show. So just thank you to you guys for being here. I know the people who are listening are just going to be absolutely over the moon with this episode, so we're so excited. But Joe, my first question for you is, how did you get into metal and playing guitar in the first place?
All right. Well, I mean, we can start. I guess I was probably about 11 years old. Had nothing to do during the summer, so my mom said, "You should take up guitar lessons." I'm like, "Heck no! Why would I want to do that?" You know. So, you know, like, again, I was forced into it. You know, of course, just like a lot of people I know. But then, like, as I got more into it, or as I, you know, like I said, begrudgingly going to guitar lessons every Friday afternoon and such. But then after like a couple of years, you know, like I started listening to, you know, like Kiss and, you know, Van Halen. And then all of a sudden, you know, like my guitar teacher would be like, "Oh, let me show you how to play this lick. Let me show you how to play this lick." And that was it. And once I started learning like Black Sabbath songs as simple as possible throughout, and playing it with my records on my acoustic and everything. That was it. I was hooked. And then from that time on, I mean, Rob and I grew up probably a block from each other. When we have some mutual friends, but like us together, I mean, we just like all the same things. You know what I mean? So as we got older and especially during high school and everything, like we started listening to all the same stuff. I mean, actually before high school, it was like grade school. We were listening to like Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and so that's how it started, and then just anything like that we were young, so we and we looked up to the people that lived, in our area that played, schools and everything, and they were playing like Scorpions tunes and stuff like that, and it was great, But that was the environment that we were around, like we weren't. Like we were pretty nerdy as kids. I mean, we weren't like, partiers and, we didn't, really drink or anything like that. But like we just liked to play, and we just decided that we were going to play together in a band. We were pretty young. I'd say, yeah. I mean, just, in grade school, we decided that, yeah, we're probably going to do this.
Nice. And that's really cool, though, that your mom kind of forced you into those lessons for a couple of years before you discovered the music that you wound up liking, because then as soon as you started hearing the music you really liked, you had all the basics down already, right?
Absolutely. But what turned me off of it was, like I would go and like the guitar lessons at the time that I was taking, it was like, oh, let's learn how to read, and let's do like all this theory and stuff like that. So I mean, like basically, like I was like this little rocker kid, but all I was learning was like Mary Had a Little Lamb and things like that. So that just kind of like really turned me off of it,
Yeah.
Then other than learning like how to read music and stuff, which was it was okay. It wasn't really something I wanted to do until like again, I started listening to guitar music, say. And then after that, I'm like, hey, I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at that time, my mom was forcing me into it. Actually, it was myself and my sister were forced into it. And then as we got older and I started getting more into it, then my mom kind of like started regretting it. Oh, what did I get into? Because like I didn't want to, I wasn't looking to go to college. I wasn't like, I thought we were gonna make it. I thought this was it. Was that what I was gonna do. So it kind of took a funny turn there, but she's still pretty proud of what I did at that point.
That's so sweet. So what years were you and Rob like befriending each other? Because I know Sacrifice formed officially in '83. Like, what years are we talking here when you guys became pals?
Probably just around in the '80s. So officially we're '83, but like I think it was like about like we'd known each other like through like the '70s. Like I said, we grew up, had mutual friends, and we were just like hanging out, playing road hockey or whatever, just doing like bad shit. And then but then as we got older, so it was about in the '80s when we started really, took it like seriously, like, yeah, we should do this for real,
Nice. Well, I know you guys formed officially in '83 and broke up in '93, and I know that you had 4 records between '86 and '93, and then you had a 5th record that came out, The Ones I Condemn, in 2009. So, in between those years where you were broken up, what was your life like in between the '93 breakup and the 2006 reemergence?
Okay, so when we broke up, like like you just kind of said that, it's not happening, it was not working anymore. We just didn't have that magic. So we started playing with like different people. Like I started playing with a couple of drummers, tried to get something going, but I mean it just kind of like a weekend hobby thing. So that fizzled out real quick. Like I wasn't that serious about forming another band and having to go through all this work and all this stuff again. So like, I mean, throughout that time, like, we just kind of like went our separate ways. I mean, we were all still friends and we all still talked or whatever, but everybody was like doing like their own different projects at the time. And then around, say, 95, I moved to the States. I moved to the Detroit area. And over here, like, like I played with a few bands. I tried to play like a little bit of like, like poppier stuff, and that got really boring after a while. So, and then I played like I was playing a little bit of hardcore with some friends. I even joined Walls of Jericho for like probably about 6 months.
No kidding.
Yeah. We did like a couple of festivals, and the only thing that we recorded, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, because I don't even have it, but we recorded like a song that came out on a flexi disc from a fanzine or whatever, and I don't even have it. I can't remember.
Oh my God!
But that was the one thing that, and then I learned like a bunch of their stuff, and we did some shows. Like we played. I believe it was like maybe Milwaukee, and we played with like bands like Fall Silent. Yeah, I mean, it was great. Like I was, at that time I was listening to like a lot of like, like hardcore stuff, like Earth Crisis and Morning Again, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, and then after, again, that it was just amicable. I just kind of like, like I've got kids. I really need to get my shit together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of, I just kind of moved on from that, and they went on to bigger things. I mean, I'm still like really good friends with a lot of them. As a matter of fact, the guitar player Mike, I was just talking to him about doing some guitar stuff for a project he was working on.
Nice.
But yeah, and then that was it. And then and I kind of like hung it up. I just put all my stuff in the basement and just resumed a normal life. And then as we start, the years start passing by, and then the talk of the reunion came up, and that was interesting. That was pretty.
How did you feel about your own playing leading up to that public return to the stage at the Equinox Festival in 2006?
I've never ever been like the biggest fan of my playing, right? And it was very rare that I would even like sit down and practice, at that time. But I knew that like once we started playing again, like the songs, it would just come back. And that's exactly how it was. It was just like, like I hadn't played like any of that stuff at all for years, so I went back, played along with the CD, just, reviewed everything or whatever. But then once we all got back together, that vibe was there, and then that was easy. It just, from there, it just kind of took over. So it's like we never even like were away.
Were you worried about it at all? Like any concerns about like putting in all this effort for these shows and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, not so much that like I wasn't worried that like, like are people going to like us and stuff. Like I was just worried that we were that we were able to play tight again, and it was great to just be with those guys. If anything, that was the biggest thing for me. Like not so much getting back together and playing for people, but just jamming with the old guys again. That was fun. That was totally worth it for me. And yeah, I mean, of course, there was like, we were thinking, oh, well, we better do this, play this properly. What songs are we going to do, this and that? But it just all falls into place. And we don't really give that much of a, we don't really put too much pressure on ourselves to do it. Like the main thing to do is like, we're going to have fun and we're going to play the songs, and that's about it,
Nice. How many practices did you guys have leading up to the Equinox Festival?
I think that's kind of vague, but I'm thinking about it. I think we practiced maybe 4 times.
Okay. Nice.
So, like after like X amount of years, 4 times, I was just like, are we going to do this? And then actually what we did was we recorded the practice, and then we listened to it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Awesome.
Here and there, but yeah, I mean, we were pretty confident. I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, we wrote those songs together and everything, so it's kind of hard to forget them,
Yeah, for sure. What was the day like of, the day of the show, like leading up to that? Because you guys hadn't been on stage together since in 13 years. How was that day for you in Toronto at the Opera House?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, yeah, it was really hectic because a lot of people wanted to talk to us, and a lot of people, they were asking us, because it was like our first time playing in Toronto in so long. So, everybody wants to talk to us and ask us this and that, like some magazines, some interviews and stuff. So it was pretty hectic. So like, I I didn't really have time to, kind of like panic about it. I mean, it was just great to see people that I hadn't seen in a while. It's like, oh my God, you guys are here. It's like anytime we play like shows like that, especially like in Toronto or even like Montreal, like places that we used to play a lot. I mean, it's just like a big party. It's just a bunch of our friends show up. Like, I mean, in Toronto, like I don't even consider like those people as like fans, but I consider them as like friends. Because like if I go like, when I was living in Toronto, like, and I would go to shows and stuff too, those are the same people that I would see.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, it's like, it's just weird to think of them as fans, because we all know them all like so personally,
That's so awesome. All right, so let's get into some Propagandhi here. So famously, Propagandhi recounted their experiences in the crowd against the barricade at Equinox in their song The Banger's Embrace from supporting cast. And I'm curious how your relationship with those guys developed, because clearly they admire you. They talk about your band all the time in every interview they do. And like they're certainly in awe of your role in their lives as people who like music. So like they found you as super fans, sort of like how I'm doing this show because I'm a super fan of them. How did you come to be aware of Propagandhi in the first place?
Okay, well being from Toronto, and and they've come around, early in the day, like during that, like how to everything years, and all their earlier stuff, and I always knew these guys were like super talented. They were like goofy and they're like very political or whatever, but actually, and I never really saw them back then too. I just knew of them because just being Canadian, you just kind of like know like a lot of the Canadian bands. So I was already living in the Detroit area, and I was out looking at new releases. I was at this one record store, and then Empires had just come out.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh man, I haven't heard these guys in a while. So of course I got it. I took it home, and I was just like, it's a totally, completely different style than what I'm used to. I'm like, these guys are like, they're turning like metal or something.
Yeah.
It was great because I loved that record. So it turns out, like, and at the time we were working on like releasing some stuff also, and then we had this website which was built in Brazil. It was off of a Brazilian one of our friends, or Armando from Marquee. He did this Sacrifice website, just to see what kind of interest we would get for like any records or releases and stuff like that. And then I got a message on there from Chris, and he says, "Hey, I don't know if you know me, but I am this, I love you guys. I've always been a fan." And I'm like, "Oh my God." I go, "Hey, so I wrote him right back, and I said, "Hey, like I'm a fan too, and I'm, just started listening, to a lot of your stuff again, and the new stuff is great." And then from that day on, I mean, we just kind of kept in touch.
Love it.
And they played, I think they played a show here in Detroit with I think it was with a Veil, and I was there, and then that's when I like officially like met Todd, right? Like, I mean, and he was just going crazy, man.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh my God, Joe from Sacrifice."
I mean, those guys are so great, and I am just as big of a fan of theirs as they are of ours. Actually, I've even told them. I've told both Todd and Chris that they're probably like my favorite Canadian band.
Awesome.
I mean, they're just super talented, and like they come off as like these really goofy guys, and they just go nuts when they play or whatever. But technically, like musically,
yeah,
they are so up there. They are so like ridiculously talented. It's amazing. Like if you put on headphones and listen to, say, like supporting cast or something like that, and just like listen to like the musicianship that they have, and it's incredible. They're like on par with like almost any of the bands that they talk about. Also, like Protest the Hero and Animals as Leaders and stuff like that. Those guys are so amazing, and they just take that style of music to like a totally different level.
Yeah, they're like a perfect crossover band because they can get in from so many different sounds. Any people who have like any taste within punk and metal can find an entry point in Propagandhi. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, like I love my fair share of like, like melodic punk rock also, like I'll put on some like Descendants and stuff like that, and like No Effects and stuff. And they have that quality too, but like but again, it's a different level of it, Like the musicianship is just so superior. It's friggin' amazing.
Yeah. How did you feel when you heard Banger's Embrace for the first time? Like, did you like realize that the song was actually about your show?
Well, actually, so I always get like Propagandhi stuff like before the release. Like, and Todd's like, I got this song, or we have this song or whatever. He goes, I don't, just, give it a listen or whatever. It's not like total thrash or nothing like that or whatever. But, just listen to it. And I listened to it. I loved it from the very start. And I thought it was great because a lot of like all those, like all the lyrics are just like little snippets of our songs.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, but yeah, absolutely. Like completely honored that they would do anything like that. Like that just floored me, and that it's amazing, and it's a great song. I mean, it's so catchy and it's well played, and yeah. It's great.
Yeah, we started our podcast with that song because it is like an homage to loving music. And so like they were writing about loving you guys, we're talking about loving them, and it's all just like a big circle. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Were you going to say something?
No, not.
Okay, cool.
I was just going to say, like, yeah, I mean, like the first time I heard it, I thought it was great. I can't remember what the other song was at the time that they let me hear off that record also. And it was, well, I mean, it was flawless as usual.
Did you hear any, like, did you guys see any traffic from Propagandhi fans after that song came out? People who were like finding you because of that song?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of weird because it's like, it's all like these like punk dudes that were like into metal like back in the day, and they're like, oh yeah, like I can't believe I started listening to you guys again after this and that. So it was kind of nice. I mean, it was really cool, and I think a lot of, and a lot of the people who like our stuff love their music also, which is great, but we're nothing alike. You know what I mean? Like we even played together, and just the crowd was just insane. It was just phenomenal, and just playing with those guys was so fun.
How many shows have you guys done together?
We just did the one. We just did the one in I think it was in Winnipeg.
Oh, sweet. Was it in relation to the 7-inch?
No, actually, I'm really bad with dates, but I think it was prior to that.
Okay, cool. So after that Equinox show, like, did your friendship with those guys like kind of like go to a new level, so to speak? Like, did you like, kind of build up from there and just become like genuine friends over the years?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we just have that like admiration for each other, and like, well, both Chris and Rob are just complete like hockey nuts too.
Awesome.
So they get along really well like that, And I mean, and every chance that they, whether they're in Toronto or in my area, like I'll always go and see them play. I mean, they're just, and I mean, I just love those guys.
Yeah, and like I get the impression that doing that split 7-inch with Propagandhi and Sacrifice in 2010 is something that Propagandhi members were sort of like gobsmacked about. I mean, like, I'm imagining if Chris asked me to collaborate on something with him, I'd be like, what? So, like, I want to know about the split collaboration. How did the idea of the 7-inch come about?
All right, so like we had decided that we were going to cover like Anthem, because we goof around with that during practice or warm ups or whatever, and I think we just totally play it different but the same.
Yeah.
So we recorded that, and of course, we let them hear it. They hear like almost everything new that we've got, and they had mentioned that they were doing Technocracy, and I'm not sure who came up with the idea, whether it was Chris or Rob or both Chris and Rob or whatever. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we're doing the split 7-inch with Propagandhi, and so and Todd's gonna like paint the cover. And
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, like I wasn't involved in like, getting it together or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that when I found out about it, I thought it was great. I go, this is amazing, and actually the amount of people that, because I thought it was just going to be like a few people here and there or whatever, but the amount of people that actually have it, it's just like, what, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think you guys only made like 1,000 of them. I have one, so I bought it when it came out. We spoke to Rob a little bit about your cover of Rush's Anthem on side A of the 7-inch. I'm curious about your thoughts on Propagandhi's cover and performance of Technocracy, which is the title track of the 1987 record by Corrosion of Conformity. What did you think about their adaptation of the song, their performance, etc.?
I actually like their version better than Corrosion of Conformity's.
Nice. Well, I mean, Chris's vocals are so clear. I was listening to the original Corrosion of Conformity, and the vocals are really hard to they're very indecipherable, but like Chris is so clear in his performance.
Yes, and that's, to me, maybe it's just because it's like newer sounding with better technology on it, but I think that they pretty much owned that song in
Awesome.
that 7-inch. I love COC also, and I love their version or the original version, but I like Propagandhi's version of that much better.
Awesome. That's really cool. And then I have another question as well. On June 10th, about a month ago, you tweeted, I just heard the most amazing Sacrifice covers done by some good friends and someone I consider one of the greatest musicians I've met. And you were referring to Chris's project where he recently did 2 covers from your Soldiers of Misfortune record. So he does In Defiance and Lost Through Time for his Patreon supporters. And he's got some great folks on these tracks. He's got James Burton from Winnipeg's Endless Chaos on drums, who crushes it. He's got Jameel Russell from Matricide, Malefaction Actors on bass. Tell me about your experience listening to these 2 songs made by Chris and his buddies in Winnipeg.
Well, I mean, already, like, coming from Chris, I knew that it was going to be amazing, right? I guess that's how he is. He seems like a real perfectionist kind of guy.
Yeah.
So he sends me a message and he says, what's a good email address for you? And so I gave it to him, and then he sends it. He goes, just listen to it and like, tell me what you think. So I, of course, listen to it.
Oh my God.
And I go, that's fucking amazing, dude. And it's like he does the song. I mean, it's his own version, and it's very similar to the original, but like you know who it is. Like, I totally know who it is. Yeah. And this playing, like, again, Chris is so, I mean, he's an amazing guitar player, but he's so underrated that, like, I don't know why people don't talk about him or why they don't put him in guitar magazines or anything, because he is a phenomenal guitar player, and it shows, like, like when he's playing, like his rhythms and everything. I mean, he's this, well, I mean, because he loves Razor too, and Dave Carlo's probably like one of the best rhythm guitar players in the world, but Chris is up there too, and he's got that. He has his own original way of playing it that I know. Like, every time I hear it, I'm like, that's totally Chris,
Yeah, man. And that double bass intro came in when I was listening to that song for the first time, and I was like, holy moly, this is going to blow the doors off this place. This is amazing.
It's very good. And again, I am like super honored that he loves to do that. This is great. Do
you have a favorite of the 2 that he did, In Defiance or Lost Through Time? Like, do you like one more than the other, or is that like an impossible question?
I like both songs, but like I'm more of like, I like to play like faster. Yeah. So In Defiance is definitely, my favorite of the 2.
That is awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I was blown away too. Like, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I'm like, is he just gonna like do it like how it is, or is he gonna like? And he did it like his own style, and it was like it's phenomenal. I have it on my phone, so I listen to it in my car all the time too.
So he wrote a little bit about the experience of doing it, and the way that he approached the vocals is he said he was trying to sound like Rob when he was originally singing it, and then he realized that was a futile endeavor. So he changed his approach to be like, if I was in the crowd watching Sacrifice play these songs, what would I sound like as I was singing along? And so that's where you get that totally unique approach that he has in the vocals, I think. So how did you feel about his vocal performance in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly it. Because I asked him, I said, I'm gonna let the guys hear this too, and he goes, yeah, just let me know what they think or whatever. And that's exactly what they said. They said that they love it because it's totally done. Like, it's not like it's a cover, but it's not like a cover per se. It's like his own version of it. And he sings it. I thought he sang it great.
Yeah, for real.
Because that's like his style of vocals and our songs. Like, I could never ever picture that, but then he pulls it off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
again, I'm so honored. I think he did they did such a fantastic job on it.
Yeah, and like he wrote in his notes for the release too. So like, first of all, going back to what you said earlier about Chris being an underrated guitar player, for me, he's like the top. I love this band so much that I'm doing a show painstakingly about every song they've ever released. So for me, obviously, I'm a huge fan, but like he came into my purview as like a guitarist with, Purina Hall of Fame, Mateka Marie Sakun Rasi Khan, Today's Empire, Tomorrow's Ashes, essentially. But then he's got these amazing songs all throughout. And so he's obviously good. And these songs challenged him when he was making these Sacrifice covers. So he wrote about the challenges of recreating the work of you and Rob, and he wrote, this is a quote from him, especially for the guitar solos, which were already going to be hindered by me not having a Floyd Rose-equipped axe. And then he wrote, Joe Rico is a master of the dive bomb, and I have no idea what that means. So, Joe, can you tell me what a dive bomb on the guitar is and what you as a player have to do and what makes that a special guitar player thing that people do?
All right. So in the very beginning, when I first started playing and then eventually I got, better equipment, better gear, the purpose of having a Floyd Rose, which is like the locking tremolo, is like when I run out of ideas for a solo, like I'll hit a harmonic and I'll grab that, and that just eventually became my style.
Awesome.
I mean, that is just how I play, and so like I incorporate that in everything. Like there isn't a solo that I do that doesn't have that. Well, maybe there's like one or two, but like for the most part, that's my thing. And and people say it all the time. They're like, oh, I love that dive bomb. How do you get this sound? How do you get that sound? I go, you know what? Like everything I play, everything I do is borrowed from somebody else. I didn't come up with any of that shit. You know what I mean? So it's like as lame as Night Ranger is, that one guitar player. I even had this same guitar, Brad Gillis, and he had the Floyd Rose, and he made cricket noises and all these like. I can make my guitar sound like a revving Lamborghini and that kind of stuff. That's when I'm playing, like all those spots on the guitar where you can basically just like touch the string and it rings. I know where all those are, and I just try to incorporate those in my solos.
Awesome. That is so cool. Yeah, and I know that like these songs really challenged Chris, which is awesome for Propagandhi fans because as he was like working through your songs, he was learning new things that maybe he had never tried before. So we might see some Sacrifice influence on future Propagandhi songs because he's like in quarantine recording these covers. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I get it. And like for me, like our style of playing is pretty simplistic, like because we have two guitar players and we play similarly, so we do like a lot of like our power chords and we do like a lot of like minor sounding riffs. Like I love all the, like say like the Egyptian sounding kind of melodies. Those are like my favorites. But then like if I sit there and I listen to like a Propagandhi record and I think, I'm like, yeah, that's easy. I can like figure that out. Like I saw plug in or whatever, and I'm like, I can't figure it out. And then like Todd has sent me some of their books, the music books, the sheet music. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, how do they come up with this shit? I go like, these guys like what the heck? Because it's like, for me that's difficult to play. I mean, it's really hard to play. I think I think the first time the first song that I learned to play of theirs is Motor League.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple enough. Like you're like, oh yeah, this thrashing or whatever. It sounds simple enough. But when you break it down, I mean, just the chord progressions and the voicings that Chris does, and Todd would be backing it up with his own voicings, and rather than just playing like the low note, it's genius, really.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy that I love like punk rock and everything about it, but it's kind of crazy that they get lumped into that genre, but yet musically, I mean, they're right up there with like all these like prog bands and stuff, I think.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Well, Joe, it has been absolutely fantastic having you here. Do you have any other like Propagandhi stories or anecdotes or like big takeaways about your fandom of them as a band as well? Like, do you have any like major takeaway thoughts for the listeners?
I really don't. I mean, like those guys are like they're like the coolest guys like I've ever met, and then like every time they see us or I see them, they're always like, oh my gosh, like like. We'd go to a show and Todd would do a shout out to my wife and everything, me and my wife like on stage, and it's pretty funny or whatever. But I mean, like I have so much respect for those guys, like musically and as people. They're very genuine people, and you can just tell in a lot of like the topics that they cover and stuff, And they're just like one of those bands that actually, as people, that just give a shit, which is pretty important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Joe, it has been just so cool having you here and also having Rob here earlier in the episode. I'm delighted that you were willing to participate and chat about the split 7-inch. Yeah, your live reemergence as a band, your friendship with those guys, and then a little bit of technique description about some of your own playing. So that's so cool. So Joe, Rico, thank you so much for coming on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. It's been just a pleasure having you.
I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Keith, those were some really fun conversations. What did you like about talking to Rob?
What stood out to me in our conversation was how many genres and words or labels hadn't been invented yet. So being there at the beginning with really kind of punk and hardcore and thrash and like the rest of the, like identity or whatever that comes along with extreme music wasn't really there yet. So what I kind of mentioned to him is that my friends all pretty much discovered metal around the same time. So our story's the same, but to be there before the genres or the subgenres that I first connected with were before those were even created, right? Or the first albums came out. It was almost like talking about metal from like, two different times or two different perspectives, because my familiarity with that or my relationship with it is so different.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And something that's interesting about that too is when I was talking to Joe, he mentioned that he'd played in like other bands. He'd played in like punk bands. He played in like Walls of Jericho for a while. And so that is super interesting to me because he went from this like this thrash band, but it was back then, like you mentioned, like the terms weren't even there yet for it. And like you as a fan of like lots of different kinds of metal, you have death metal, you have black metal, you have thrash, you have grindcore, you've got all the different little subgenres within it and all the sounds that encapsulates, and how these guys were just like before all of that. Isn't that wild?
Right. Yeah.
So they got to like see it all along the way. I absolutely loved that. And, I just loved how kind and enthusiastic Joe and Rob are to talk about their own band, but also to talk about how much they love Propagandhi and their enthusiasm to be engaged in this project. I thought that was so, so awesome.
Yeah. Listen to Sacrifice, people. Go buy their stuff.
Absolutely. So should we get into our Propagandhi song for this episode, Technocracy?
Yeah. What does that mean?
So I had to look this up because I thought that term was far too specific to be made up. You know what I mean? I thought it's like, this has to mean something. And I am reluctant to go too far into what this means because I've only really just discovered it. And I don't think it's a weakness at all to acknowledge when you don't fully understand something yet. And so like for me to like go on a podcast and like say what technocracy is whenever it's likely this very deep idea that has existed for a long time that I just haven't really explored yet, I think is like deeply irresponsible. But I looked up the definition, and what it means is technocracy is an ideological system of governance in which a decision maker or makers are elected by the population or appointed on the basis of their expertise in a given area of responsibility, particularly with regard to scientific or technical knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I also get maybe a vibe that it's the opposite from the lyrics. It's that a lack of expertise has risen to the top and taken control.
Yeah, it's really interesting because on the cover, having everything in charge of experts sounds ideal. It sounds, interesting because like that's so far and away different from what you and I are currently living under in the United States. So whenever I read that definition, I was like, experts in charge of everything? And I was having this like super positive reaction to it. And I'm certain,
what's that like?
Yeah, and I'm super positive that I'm, attaching myself to this term in a way that maybe is like too idealistic in nature. Like I don't particularly or thoroughly understand what it's about because I'm only discovering it for the first time. And hey, I'm a lifelong learner, I think. So this is something that maybe I'll have to dig into a little bit more. So if anybody else out there has any suggestions on exploring this system of thought or ideology more deeply, I am happy to be schooled a little bit. So Keith, let's get into Corrosion of Conformity. Are you a fan?
I never really listened to them a ton. I think my tastes have changed now since I kind of used to jam their Southern rock albums every once in a while, maybe in my 20s. Wise Blood and Blind I listen to here and there. But revisiting now, I think the earlier sound, that thrashy punk crossover, appeals to me more now. And I had the opportunity to see them in 2015 at Dark Lord Day, hosted by the brewery Three Floyds. But my brother got super drunk, and I had to leave during Obituary set and take him home. So I didn't get to see them.
Holy smokes. I just saw Obituary here in Buffalo last year, and the Cro-Mags, the John Joseph Cro-Mags.
Yeah.
And they also played, and Hatebreed was the headliner. So I saw Cro-Mags with John Joseph, and I was supposed to interview him, but apparently he injured himself during the show and he stopped responding to my messages. But I was totally going to interview him about Age of Quarrel and all of the the Hindu influences behind his life and all of his years as like a monk and like within Krishna. So I was supposed to interview John Joseph, but I saw But I was sitting there watching Obituary, texting John Joseph, trying to get him to respond to my messages so I could do the interview. I had all the microphones and everything set up in the car to go outside and talk about Age of Quarrel, but it didn't work out. But
we both have unfortunate Obituary live stories.
Absolutely. Well, that's a real bummer that you missed COC, because was that before Pepper Keenan had come back into the fold? Were they playing with that Animosity era 3-piece lineup? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
That's cool. Were they like they were doing like a headlining show?
Yeah, they were the last band to play.
It must have been Pepper Keenan coming back. The guy who sings on Wise Blood and Deliverance. It must have been him. And he's also in Down. I mean, he's like a legend. So this might sound super lame to some listeners. I'm sure that there are some diehard 80s Corrosion of Conformity fans out there, but they were just before my time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even really discover punk until like 1994 at the earliest. So like whenever COC was doing their records Wise Blood and Deliverance, that's when I was really getting into music, you know? So I was super into Pepper Keenan COC records, and I didn't really ever explore outside of that until the 2014 album. I guess it's called 9. It's the Roman numeral IX. Until that record was released. But that was without Pepper Keenan. So that was the 3-piece lineup with Mike and Woody and Reed. And it was so jarringly different from what I was used to with Pepper Keenan, with all those super southern riffs and that slow like pace, that I failed to fully digest that record in 2014. That said, it has been in my CD changer in my car since 2015, because I currently only have like 8 or 10 CDs like in total. And so I listen to the same and so like I listen to 9 by COC every now and then, because it's like been in my CD changer for literally 5 years. But in 8th and 9th grade, I absolutely loved Wise Blood and Deliverance, and I still think that Pepper Keenan is a great singer to this day. So let's get into the track Technocracy itself. Tell me a little bit about what you think about the lyrics of this song.
Well, right away, reading over them, I think this could be a Propagandhi song. That line at the beginning, that's kind of the spoken word intro, where it says, perhaps it's all for the better that things collapse and we wipe ourselves out. And I think there's a level of cynicism and pessimism that pretty much, sums up Propagandhi. So there's a lot of overlap here. And I think, with this song, how many of the issues that are addressed in this, like when I first, started thinking about Technocracy, I guess I thought like rule by technology, where we've put technology, but maybe not the experts, but the devices or the innovations themselves in positions of power, to where we like those things rule our lives, but not really, people in control of them. So that's kind of how I interpreted the lyrics. But there are a lot of other issues that are addressed throughout the song. So whether that's mass surveillance in a police state, right now with everything that's going on during, a pandemic and national and global unrest, ecological collapse, desertification or ocean acidification. And I think also our complicity in these systems that in a way keep us down. They mentioned something about earning $50,000 a year and you're fine. There's your pacifier. You're not going to speak out against those things because you're making yours. And it kind of reminds me of a line from the last Pig Destroyer album on the song Army of Cops, where he says, JR sings, "Now could it be that secretly we liked being kept down?"
That reminds me of Adventures in Zoocosis as well.
Yeah. And there just seems to be like this almost self-punishing, but also apathy, and like we've built our luxuries and our comforts and pleasures in a way that we don't really want to undo them. We don't really want to fix things. We don't want to actually see massive change because it means those things are going to be undone.
Yeah, and we might put our own creature comforts at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm sitting here in my home office. I've got a, Fender Stratocaster hanging on the wall. I got a bunch of records behind me. I've got all the books I could ever read sitting next to me. I've got a nice carbonated beverage here with me. I'm sitting in air conditioning, and I'm not out, raging in the streets right now.
Yeah.
All of my creature comforts are being met. I'm not in pain. I'm not too hot. I'm not too cold. I'm not hungry. It's that it is the pacifier. Absolutely. But what's super interesting is that 1987, they said, as long as you make $50,000 a year, dude, that's like that's more than I make now.
Yeah.
In 2020. And it makes me so crazy that like people in 1987 were making $50,000 a year. And, decades later, you and I are still not even making that. And we're teachers. I mean, it's interesting. You go into a quote unquote caring profession and what's the reward,
Right. Not only do we not make that, but everything else has gotten more expensive as like those wages have stayed stagnant, or in some cases have actually dropped if you adjust for inflation.
Yeah. Putting a new roof on my house is 1/6 of my salary.
Yeah.
It's insane. So anyway, it's tough. So do you have any other favorite like lines in this song? Like this is a really wild journey.
Yeah, there are a couple. I think the line, the technology that spawned our every convenience, creating more and more poison, pledge of toxic allegiance. So there's so much to be said about America's failure to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think while it's undeniable that leadership has failed at pretty much every level, whether that's, a boss at, a commercial chain store or a school board or a governor or the president, individuals have also failed, as this has like disrupted our conveniences and our luxuries that we mistake for inalienable rights.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I joke about this a lot. I was, walking around in the village next to my house yesterday, and I wore a mask, and like I sent out a picture to a couple friends and I said, look how oppressed I am, because I was wearing a mask in the picture.
Yeah.
And there were probably 50% of people doing what I was doing, and I live in New York, a state that was like absolutely ravaged by this pandemic. So people here take it quote unquote seriously, and our curve is currently flat. But I see people with my own eyes constantly just being like, yeah, it's not comfortable, it's not convenient, I can't breathe right. So like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? They're just out there willy-nilly doing whatever they're gonna do. But like, so to me, this song, that I love that line you just mentioned, the technology that spawned our every convenience, creating more and more poison, pledge of toxic allegiance. So to me, this song is about like the world completely falling apart. And then we have to work inside, under shelter, and away from like other people. And this is like, it's a dystopian thing that we've sort of talked about with a past song, When All Your Fears Collide. But it reminds me of now, actually, except we aren't necessarily listening to the technocrats appointed who have this quote-unquote expertise. And so I looked a little deeper into this as well. And the 7 inches liner notes, Propagandhi thanks COC for their master stroke of Corybantism that we honor here. And I had no idea what that meant. So what do you do when you don't know what something means? You look it up. So I looked it up. Corybantism is a delirium characterized by vivid, frightening hallucinations and causing insomnia. So I'm just picturing these like frightening technologies that we invent to make our lives better, which then completely run amok and cause us to have to run for our lives. We listen to the technocrats that run the show, and they push and push and push our planet to the very edge and cause like some kind of like canticle for Leibowitz, like toxic destruction. And so that's what I'm envisioning whenever I listen to this song.
Yeah, but while that's happening, the message that is coming from those in power is completely different. So another line after that is technocracy, all American clones, on and on, their sermon drones. So, our rhetoric as a country, when I say our, of course, I mean American, speaking as you and me are Americans, is so righteous. It's full of ideas about, democracy and egalitarian principles and truth and justice. And, at the end of the day, I think America as a whole would rather look like it cares about an issue while actually doing nothing to address systemic racism or inequality or ecological collapse if our precious American way of life is to be challenged.
Cool, man. Do you have any other any lyrical thoughts on this song? Because the imagery within it is vivid. It's scary.
Yeah, and at the very end, I think it's just spoken during the outro. You could kind of hear it in the original version a little bit more than Propagandhi's cover. But there's a line that says, "There are limits to growth on this planet." And I think the very beginning with perhaps it's all for the better, and that idea, I think they're just sharp and they're insightful and they're concise, powerful lyrics. So what came to mind with that is the book A Short History of Progress by Ronald Wright, who sort of refers to cultural and technological innovations as progress traps, he calls them. So when creativity leads ultimately to recklessness. And he gives the example of this really vivid metaphor, I think, of early hunter-gatherers learning how to kill 2 mammoths. And that's progress because they have more food now. But later, they innovate a technique driving an entire herd of mammoths over a cliff, and that kills off essentially all of their food supply, and they have no way to preserve it. And of course, that leads to a disaster. Like maybe they have a lot at first, but eventually they're going to move or they're going to starve. So I think that metaphor, right, apply that to a global population of almost 8 billion and factor in nuclear weapons, fossil fuels, forever chemicals like PFAs, which are used in Teflon. Those things never break down, 1 billion cars. And you have a picture of our way of life that starts to look less and less like progress and, civilization, and more like the destruction of, say, Easter Island writ large across the entire planet. And
have you ever heard of the movie Koyaanisqatsi?
I know what it is, but I have not seen it.
Okay. It basically means life out of balance. And it's this like time lapse film of all of the things that are being spewed out into our world. And it is an utterly stunning film. And I think it's from the 80s. And the first time I ever watched it was massively eye-opening for me. And everything you just said just screams Koyaanisqatsi, life out of balance to me.
It sounds like the negative of like the BBC Planet Earth documentaries.
It does.
Like,
yeah, it is.
It's the human version of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that too, I think about nuclear weapons, and we always say it would be funny if it weren't so sad or scary. It's kind of like our slapstick ability or inability to contain and manage nuclear weapons. Like I have this visual of Uncle Sam on a pair of roller skates, and he has like the detonator from Terminator 2. And just recently seeing that in 2019, right, the US military only stopped using 8-inch floppy disks to manage and maintain our nuclear arsenal of almost 7,000 warheads.
Wait, when?
Last year.
Oh my God.
Right. So
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And that there I think there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So, you and I kind of grew up under the fear and the threat of nuclear weapons. Maybe for me more so in like movies because it was carried over from the 80s. But my students have no idea. Like climate change has completely overtaken that. But while that's still important for them to be aware about, aware of and care about, which they do, they still don't realize like what lies underneath that too, with like our own another way that we can, destroy ourselves. That would be fast and instantaneous, but it's not talked about in culture anymore, or it's not really talked about in schools or in classrooms or whatever. So that fits into the song for me as well.
Yeah, it's a Koyanis Katsi set to music. I love it. Tell me about the music then. What did you think about this song? This is a wild song.
Yeah, I saw Chris Hanna said capturing its essence is definitely one of the most challenging things we've ever faced as a band. And I think he said after that, like, if you don't believe me, try it. Like, try to record the song.
Just the intro alone, I was listening to it and I was like following along, and it has those low floor tom rolls, and bomb bomb, and I was just like listening to it, just thinking about that. It's like the tone is spooky. I love it.
Yeah, there's definitely an eerie. I was thinking about that word earlier, eerie. So I think the song fits in lyrically with Propagandhi, but there's also a lot of parallels with their music as well. So you have like that building kind of metal riff in the intro with the whispered vocals that lets you know something big is going to happen. There's like the crossover verse. It sounds like it could be kind of out of today's Empires a little bit if Todd were singing. And then there's that straight up, thrash bridge at 1 minute and 22 seconds that I think could even fit on Victory Lap, sounding a little bit like Comply Resist.
See, to me, say this was a Propagandhi original, I feel like this would fit smack dab in the middle of Failed States. I feel like the tone of the lyrics and the darkness and especially that break in the middle of it where the music cuts out and then it comes back in with just the bass and the drums going super fast, and then it goes into that absolutely ripping solo. I was like, this belongs on Failed States. To me, that's where it belongs. Like, that's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I like the breakdown. There's like that stomping part under when it slows down and says lock your doors. I like the gang vocals a lot, and I would totally not be opposed if Propagandhi started using them more often and not just on the cover songs. I like the bass break, like you said, that leads into that chaotic, shreddy, super 80s sounding solo.
Yeah.
That, to me, like, that's what a circle pit sounds like. Like that part of the song. And I think Jord does a great job just bookending this song with those ascending drum fills in the beginning, and then it kind of like slowly dies out, but kind of fades out a little bit. Yeah.
Did that guitar solo remind you of any other Propagandhi solos, or was it just something that, like, do you feel like this has any resonance with any of their other guitar work? It kind of reminded me of that solo on Iteration a little bit. It was
I would have said maybe like Coach's Corner.
Oh, in the intro to Coach's Corner, you mean?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, nice. That's super wild. I love it.
No,
it did. This song sent me down some musical rabbit holes the last couple days. So I listened to the COC version and the Propagandhi version both like 5 or 6 times. But then I was like super in the mood for Municipal Waste, and I listened to Headbanger Face Rip like 5 times. And then I've been listening to some DRI, and I remember that I saw DRI a few years back on tour, and it was just wonderful. It reminded me of seeing Suicidal Tendencies at Warped Tour when I was a kid, but then also seeing them at a club show a few years later after that in St. Louis. It reminded me of Age of Quarrel, like that came up earlier, so maybe I had John Joseph like totally in my head. But I listened to Prong a little bit yesterday. I listened to some old Agnostic Front too. So like having this album come out in '87 though, and having my first exposure to COC be Wise Blood really shaded my ability to enjoy this other stuff by COC. So I'm still exploring that, but man, this song, this EP sent me down this crossover thrash rabbit hole. And I just want to know if we can just recategorize Propagandhi as crossover thrash and never call them a punk band again. It's not an easy song. I have a lot of learning and a lot of re-exploring to do in 80s crossover, but like I was just thinking about everything from Empires onward to me is basically like crossover.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the lesson takeaways from this song? What does this song like teach you?
I think it's really easy to be pessimistic about just about everything.
Absolutely.
I know for me it is. If that, I mean, the future survival, what we call humanity. So when this song, and I mean that when the song was like first recorded in 1987, when it was covered in 2010, or now while we're talking about it in 2020, I think a lot about how my students talk about climate change and, global warfare, if the most recent example being Iran. I mean, they're kind of haunted by the specter of ecological collapse, and they don't even have the booming economy of like the 90s to fall back on like I did. So maybe things were awful, but everyone could, not everyone, but I got to go on vacation every year, and my parents could buy me the video games that I wanted. It made it easier to push those things out of sight and mind. So I think it is important to address these like awful, heavy topics that kind of weigh us down or make us feel hopeless, as long as we're trying to find practical ways to make a difference, which can feel, futile. But one example that comes to mind for me is, as a teacher, Earth Day. Every year it's about picking up garbage around the community or planting a tree. And that doesn't seem to send the message about what we as individuals could actually do to make a difference with our carbon footprints. And if we really want to change things, like if we're going to, write a song that talks about how, we're on the brink of collapse, well, we also have to kind of address our relationship with factory farm meat and automobiles, and try to provide practical solutions for individuals to say, here's what you could do to make a difference. And maybe that difference starts kind of small and it builds over time. But I know the doom and gloom doesn't always help, and it doesn't help me for sure.
Yeah, and another thing I was thinking about with this song is I remembered an old Suicide Machine song where one of the lyrics, I think it was on Battle Hymns, and the lyrics were "Make way for progress."
Yeah.
And, in the name of progress, we strive. But it seems to me many of the things that could make our planet better, or the things our nation in particular is running in the other direction away from. Like we just cling to all these things that we know deep down are terrible, that we shouldn't be doing. But we think, well, I'm just one more person doing them. Everybody else is doing them too. And so why should I have to give it up? I'm only here for 70 years or whatever. It's not going to make any difference. So like we live in this pacified state of thinking that a single person's actions don't make any difference. And so it is distressing. I hear what you're saying about, pessimism and the ease of being pessimistic and looking around and seeing people do things that are terrible for the world and being like, look at all these people doing all this thing. Look at that drive-through line at McDonald's. Look at those people streaming onto that massive jumbo jet to fly to Australia and to fly to Europe and whatever. And, it's really tough. And, evaluating the character of leaders seems to be like such a simple endeavor, but we fail miserably. But it's also because like, look at who is presented to us as viable options for leadership, and look at how often people with actual ideas are ostracized or, shunted off by, those who are in power who wanted to cling to their ideas while not embracing the new. And it bugs me. And so this reminds me of like another Propagandhi song, like you can vote however you want, but power still calls all the shots. and the screws get turned on all of us seeking to create for the people who want to create a more ideal future. But the screws get turned on us whenever we speak out and stand up. And then, moms get ripped away in the middle of protests by secret police. And so the screws are getting turned right in front of our very eyes. And it's disheartening. But I am glad that I can see it with my own eyes, and I'm glad that I'm not ignoring it, and I'm glad I'm not saying things like, "Oh, well, they were breaking the rules, and so what? Yeah, they got punished. They were breaking some rule." And I'm glad that I'm not looking at this like that, and I'm trying to keep a clear view on what exactly is happening around me all the time.
It kind of feels like that boiling frog parable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I saw a super eerie photograph of like a mom being ripped away by like a masked like secret police guy, paramilitary guy. And she's like looking back into the camera, arm reaching out, the soldier, whoever they were, is ripping her away. And, why am I paying attention to that photo? Well, it's like a white mid-40s mom, like a hippie mom, right? And I'm like, why am I so taken by this photo and not this other photo? Because this thing is happening all over the world. What is it about that white mid-40s mom being ripped away by this secret police that is so distressing? So anyway, that might be a tangent, but that's just kind of where my thoughts are the last couple days.
Did you find any YouTube comments?
Yeah, so what do we got some YouTube comments here? So the band who originally made this song was way ahead of their time. Corrosion of Conformity. Couldn't agree more. I can't speak enough to the power of songs that are decades old but sound like they were released this week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The audio doesn't sound like it was recorded this week, but like you listen to the message and what's being sung about, and it's a timeless song. I can totally see why Propagandhi chose to cover it. Did you find any good YouTube comments?
I found one that just said props.
Nice.
And another said, one of the most important bands of the last 20 years, so far ahead of any other politically influenced band, in my opinion. Their music is confronting, intellectual, and brilliantly written, not to mention their talent as musicians. Can't wait for their next record. And when I first read that, I thought they were talking about Corrosion of Conformity since it was a cover, and a lot of the comments were clearly fans of, Eye for an Eye and the early crossover stuff. And then it took a second to realize, like, oh, they're talking about Propagandhi.
Yeah, and for me, I like talking about covers with you. I like talking about Propagandhi's covers. I think they have a government issue cover that I'm really looking forward to discussing. But yeah, I like doing this, but I'm not going to rank this one. It's a cover. Do you want to rank it?
No, I will say that I really like this cover, but preparing for this episode, I like the original more.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Interesting. I like Propagandhi's more because I feel like I can follow the vocals easier. I think but I just think that's like the recording difference and like the ability of like, recording budgets in the 1980s. Like, I don't know what it was like to record a record in 1987 for Metal Blade Records. Like, I have no idea. Right. So you can go with COC's version being better, and I'll go with Propagandhi's version being better. But the thing is, like, I have to give all the credit where credit is due to COC because they wrote it, and without them doing it, Propagandhi wouldn't have recorded it either. So I'm super glad to see this song put forth by Propagandhi as something that influenced them so deeply, because I love the fact that, like, if this song popped up on the Middle of Failed States and I didn't know it was a cover, I'd have been like, that's a banging Propagandhi song about the environmental toxicity and destruction. So that's, like, to me, like, so powerful that they liked it so much and like they embodied it so well that they totally could have fooled me had I not known that this was a cover in the first place.
Yeah, if I didn't hear this beforehand, or if I did, I didn't know it enough to recognize it as a cover song. I would have not seen it as an outlier. I would have thought, yeah, for sure, that maybe one is a little different than some other tracks, but I don't think it's a cover.
All right, well, that is our episode for the split 7-inch between Sacrifice and Propagandhi, talking about Anthem and Technocracy. Thanks again to Joe and Rob from Sacrifice for coming on the show. Please, please, please go check out their records. You can get them on vinyl from waronmusic.com. But you can also find them on Apple, Spotify, whatever, wherever you get music. If you want to find us, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the hashtag, or at the handle at PropagandhiPod. And you can email us at propagandhipod@gmail.com. So please tell your friends, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi, is created, hosted, and produced by Keith Goff and Greg Soden. Musical clips on this show are composed and performed by Propagandhi. Artwork on the show is by Justin Santora, who can be reached at justinsantora.com. You can find us on Twitter at PropagandhiPod and on Instagram at PropagandhiPod. If you like the show, please drop a rating on your podcast app of choice and subscribe to receive future episodes. Tell your friends. Thank you so much for listening.